My guest today is filmmaker John Ornoy, who has been making films for more than 15 years, producing and directing 5 shorts and 3 features for outlets such as Bravo, Super Channel, Stars, and Peacock. Now, among his award-winning titles is the feature documentary With Glowing Hearts as the short True Love Waits, which was produced in 2012 with a $100,000 prize awarded by the Whistler Film Festival. Now, more recently, John produced the 2020 feature, All Joking Aside, which took home the New Visions Award at the festival premiere as CineQuest, and his feature documentary directing debut, Lost in the Shuffle, premiered in competition at Hot Docs in 2024. Now, the Lost in the Shuffle documentary film features 2-time world champion magician Shawn Farquhar, and this documentary explores the unique relationship between the art of magic and playing cards. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome filmmaker John Ornoy and his feature documentary, Lost in the Shuffle, to the show. Welcome, John.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
You're very welcome. And, well, first off, what inspired you to become a filmmaker?
That's a great question. I think towards the end of high school, I was starting to wonder what was going to happen next, what my next steps were going to be. I'd done a bit of acting. I'd always enjoyed writing and photography. And so getting into film school seemed kind of a way to bring all those interests together. And it did not involve taking any more math or science classes. And so that was a pretty good factor as well.
I love that. I love that. Now, I want to talk about this incredible film documentary, Lost in the Shuffle. I enjoyed watching this film so much because it was fun, it was entertaining, it was intriguing, had a bit of mystery to it, but I never knew that a simple deck of playing cards has quite such a very long history. Were you amazed by that?
Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. I mean, part of my motivation to begin with was just an interest in the creative process of magicians. As an artist, I have my creative process. And I was very intimately involved in every part of making this film. But you look at my credits, and there's like 700 names in there, so I definitely didn't do it by myself. But someone like Shawn really does do pretty much everything on his own. So I was really interested in that creative process, and then also how something very simple like a deck of cards that for most of us is an inert object. It sits in your junk drawer for most of the time. You might take it out to play some hands of poker or something, but placed in the hands of a magician becomes this kind of endless source of creative inspiration and awe and wonder. There's probably an uncountable number of card tricks have been created already, and there are still thousands more to come. And so I was really interested in exploring what it was about this one very simple object that could inspire so much incredible stuff.
Well, where did the idea come from to create a documentary about the origins of a deck of playing cards, but then incorporating card magic into the story?
It all started by going to see Shawn's show. I'd seen him on TV before, but back in 2019, before he has the theater that you see in the film, he opened up a little pop-up space, maybe like 10-minute drive for me. It was my birthday. I saw the ad, and I said, hey, I'm going there. And it was a phenomenal show. It's not often you get to see one of the people who's like the best in the world at what they do, doing it 10 feet in front of your face. And after an entire evening of just great stuff, I did something I'd never done before, and I sent the performer an email a couple of days later and said, that was fantastic. Can I buy you a beer? I promise not to ask you how you do any of your tricks. And Shawn, being a very approachable and nice guy, agreed. And so I think maybe on the second or third time that we were hanging out, he pulled out his laptop and showed me this little PowerPoint he put together for this court card conspiracy story, as he was calling it, which kind of told him his theory that hidden in the art of every standard deck of cards are the clues to the murder of a French king in 1498. And he was thinking that, it might be like something like a TED Talk or something that he would perform, give to a magic organization or a convention or something. But immediately that grabbed me as kind of a great hook for a film, because I love the idea that you could have, the clues to a 500-year-old cold case murder hidden in some of the most famous art of the world. And that's what got the ball rolling.
I was so amazed because I got to thinking about the film as I was watching it. How much planning did you have to do beforehand? Because you're telling two stories at once, two main stories, but there's other sub stories within the film as well, because you have other well-known magicians that are talking about what they have done with a deck of cards, where it originated from. Uh, what was harder, creating the story beforehand or the editing process?
Both definitely had their challenges. One of the kind of silver linings of the pandemic was I was at home and I had time to do nothing but research. So that gave me an opportunity to get really focused, and I learned a lot about medieval French history that I knew nothing about. And there's so much weirdness and incestuousness that we didn't even get a chance to touch on the film because it made things very, very complicated. So it definitely was a challenge to take the kind of big story threads that I'd assembled after doing the research, and then figuring out how to weave them together into something that made sense as a narrative. And so I worked with the story editor for a couple of weeks to do that, and then that gave me like a 15 or 20 page treatment that I had broken down scene by scene. So that was effectively the script that we were used to shoot the documentary, and like give us something to plan off of. So I knew each scene what I was hoping, what information would come out from it. But then, when we sat down to actually do the picture edit, largely threw that treatment out the window. There's not a lot that stayed from it because, it's very interesting how something that flows and makes sense on the page, once you actually have the material, doesn't necessarily work the same way. The editing process was probably about 6, 7 months. And we didn't have a huge shooting ratio, but there was definitely the challenges of how to weave the A story of Shawn's pursuit of this murder mystery. Like I said, also exploring the history of the relationship between magicians and card magic. And then Shawn also creates a routine. And so that he actually did that over the course of our some weeks of filming in Europe, running around like headless chickens. For each one of the magicians that we meet, Shawn learns their favorite trick. And then while we were traveling, he actually was creating a new routine that he performed at the castle in France. And that was kind of the final scene. It was the last thing that we filmed. So he was actually doing it as we were going.
I was wondering, because I was trying to think, how long did it take Shawn to create this multifaceted card trick to tell the story of the King of Hearts? And to think that he created this within the time frame of actually filming it makes it even more astounding and phenomenal to think, because I was, as the story was being told, I couldn't wait for when he was at the castle in France to actually do the whole trick, tell the whole story, because it was absolutely fascinating. And not just him creating this card trick, but you filming it. You also implemented animation within the making of this film. And I know animation is not quick to do.
No, they were fantastic partners. I'd never directed animation before, so they were great collaborators. They're a Vancouver-based company called Jesters Animation. That was a lot of fun, and kind of seeing that process come to life from my ideas and their initial sketches and storyboards and everything. Shawn did a great job with the routine. None of the magicians knew the court card conspiracy story when we came, so all their reactions on camera were genuine, and Shawn didn't know what the plots, what the card tricks that they were going to pick were either. So he generally had to figure it out. Our last filming stop before the castle was with Juan Tamariz in Madrid, and he is a night owl, so he showed up for our interview at like 8 p.m. And then they went out for dinner afterwards, so they didn't get back to the hotel until probably like 1 or 2 in the morning. We had to fly from Madrid back to France, and then we had our van was waiting for us in the airport in Nantes, and then we were going to drive to Amboise for our final stop. But we got to the airport in Madrid at like 5:30, and were informed that there were no flights available into France because of the strikes that were going on at the time. So we basically had to rent a van and drive back to where our other van was. So it was about 13 hours of driving to get to our final stop, and Shawn did a good chunk of that driving. So that even cut more into his time to figure out how to integrate Juan's trick that he had just learned. He had like less than 24 hours to integrate it into the routine. And like I said, I spent a good chunk of that time driving long distances in the dark.
So, okay, because I remember the part in the film where y'all had to make that 13-hour drive. And so driving back to France, that was when you were going to film the final scene when he brings the whole trick, the whole story together. He
Yeah,
did it.
so we were
It
hoping
was
to give him, a good.
it was so amazing. I mean, to think that he lost 13 hours of time to study and figure it out, but he pulled it off
Yeah,
flawlessly.
yeah. By the time we filmed that final scene, I was literally lying on the ground watching the monitors because I was so physically and emotionally exhausted, and he was very tired as well. But as soon as the camera hitched up, he just turns on, and the performer comes out, and we did 2 or 3 runs at it, and you can't tell that he was barely standing up. So
Yeah, I don't want to give away any of the magic, the card tricks in this film. I want people to watch this film and enjoy it like I did. So I'm going to be like a magician and never tell the secrets. But for you, was there a particular part of the history of a deck of cards that surprised you the most?
I think the coolest thing that I learned about this entire process is something called the 52 factorial. It features in the end of the film. There's a little animation sequence in the credits you should keep an eye out for. And it's a gigantic number that describes the number of possible combinations that can exist in a single deck of cards. The number is about 80 digits long. By comparison, the universe, the age of the universe in minutes is about 20 or 30 digits long. So it basically means that every time you shuffle a deck of cards, statistically speaking, there's never been a deck of cards in that exact order in the history of mankind, nor will there likely ever be. And that one, I still have trouble wrapping my head around because it just seems so impossible, but that's the math.
Yeah, I can't even fathom that because you're thinking there's 52 cards in a deck. The possibility of shuffling the deck and it being like a deck that somebody else did, to think that it's never been duplicated is mind-boggling. And
Mm-hmm.
I thought I thought one of the elements in the film I thought was so funny was as you were telling the story about the origin of a deck of cards and all of the different iterations that it had gone through, but there was still where the face cards, there was that they stayed the same even though the art started to change, but you could see where they kept it very, very consistent. But I thought the funniest thing was the hidden pictures in the early cards, which was quite humorous and also risque at the same time. Did those cards
Yeah.
shock you?
Yeah, I wasn't ready for those either. We got to that museum. It was a fantastic museum in Belgium that has a lot of the old printing presses, and you'll see kind of processes of how cards used to get made. Um, so yeah, there were some risque cards that were made, I think, back in the 1700s that normal held them up normally, they look totally fine. But if you held a candle behind them and backlit it, you would see some pornographic images that were hidden in there. That's the reason the film has a PG rating and not something even lower.
Yeah, you only showed, I
But yeah,
mean, even, yeah, you had the wide shot of showing all of the cards, but then there was a couple of close up shots, just enough to give the audience, like, oh, give us that moment of shock. But at the same time, I really found it kind of funny that
yeah, it's
even
just
back,
interesting to see all the different ways that cultural ways that cards have been involved that we don't even think about, that they've just become so integrated into our daily lives that they're kind of invisible, but they've had a lot of really fascinating impacts and roles.
well, the printing alone, I mean, the different forms of printing, the paper. I mean, you covered every facet of the playing card, and I don't think you left any stone unturned in telling the history, because I found it so fascinating. But to take that history of the playing card and then integrate it with magic at the same time, this film flows so well. It's like you're watching multiple stories going on at the same time.
I think one of the kindest reviews that we've gotten so far was from our Hot Docs run, and they said that one of the filmmaker reviewers said that the film made more sense than it had any right to, and I took that as a high compliment.
I
We've actually had two more scenes that we weren't able to fit in the film that are on our YouTube page. One is a visit to a card factory, a modern card factory in Orlando. So you can kind of see the contrast between the processes we show in the film that are a few hundred years old and what digital processes are now, and obviously, how much things have been sped up. And then there's also a really fascinating interview with a researcher in London named Gustav Kuhn, who studies the psychology and science of magic, because so much of what magicians do takes advantage of the shortcomings of our brain and our brain's inability to process all the information that comes at us. So by studying what magicians do and how they take advantage of those shortcuts, we learn a lot about human cognition. So both of those themes you can catch on our YouTube channel, which is Animal Mother Films.
You have the history of the playing card, and then you incorporated magic. Did you have any idea of the possibility of adding um, playing cards, let's say Vegas, and those that count them? Was that a temptation, or was that something that you didn't want to add in? Because I think it probably would have added more confusion.
Yeah, ultimately, I wanted this to be like a love letter to magic. It's an art form. I'm not a magician. It's kind of ridiculous. Even after the entire process, I still don't know any magic tricks, even though I've hung out with some of the best magicians in the world. I think it's an art form that's underrated. Doesn't get the credit it deserves usually. There is, part of it that is the kids' birthday parties, and that's great too. That definitely serves a role. But the people that we profile in the film are genuinely artists. This is their form of artistic expression. It says something about them. And so I wanted people to walk away with a better appreciation of just how hard it is to make magic look easy and how many different skills you have to excel at to be world class. And that's kind of why I wanted to show Shawn's creative process in the film. So you get this a small sense there. We're not revealing any secrets. Um, I just want people to get a better sense of, what it takes and how much practice. And, in the trailer, you see Shawn messed up while he's rehearsing. And I really appreciate the fact that he was okay with us having that in the film. Because I think that's a great thing for everyone to see. That even when you are at the top of your game, that you will still mess up. And that's okay. That's just part of the process. And you will get past it and you will do better the next time. And when it came to actually perform, he got it all right. But yeah, I think it's a great lesson for everybody.
I was wondering, because we were filming, if there was any worries that secrets would have been revealed, but you were able to keep everything secret. Of course, the magicians are not going to show how a particular trick is done, but I did like the one where it was Shawn and then the other magician who is blind. And
Richard Turner, yeah,
yeah,
incredible.
and the way he was showing how he was pulling cards out of the deck, and if you didn't know, he never touched the top card. And even Shawn, I loved the surprise on Shawn's face because he was sitting there watching and then he was trying to learn to do that at the same time and picked it up pretty quickly. And I was like, wow. I'm like, how many Vegas dealers know how to do that?
Yeah, Richard is a phenom. There's actually a fantastic documentary just about him called Dealt, which details his entire life. Yeah, he can do absolutely anything with a deck of cards in the context of dealing a poker hand, even though he is completely blind. He's also a fifth degree karate black belt. Um, he is, yeah, probably got my vote for definitely one of the most interesting people in the world.
What what amazed me was that he can hold a deck of cards and just by feel he knows. And and then it also surprised me on you had clips, you had scenes where a lot of these magicians just had a closet full of brand new deck of cards. Like with Shawn, does he use a brand new deck every time he goes out to perform?
No, well, Richard, in addition to everything else, is also the official quality control for Bicycle. So the largest card manufacturer in the world. He approves everything. They've done MRIs on him and found that his tactile and visual centers of his brain have merged. So he describes his fingers as being 10 little eyeballs. So that's the reason why he has that closet of all those decks of cards. He does wear through a deck of cards because he shuffles quite obsessively. Even he's not really performing anymore, but he'll still do 6 8 hours a day shuffling. So yeah, he'll wear through a deck of cards probably in a day or something. Um, Shawn, I think, lasts longer. He has a collection, I think, about 4,000 decks from all over the world and all his various travels and everything. So he talks in the film how he'll open up one and play around with it and stuff and get the feel, and the other one he'll keep sealed for his collection.
Wow, that again, this film is so impressive. And as you were filming, and you're following Shawn around the world, talking with other magicians, does it seem like there's a bit of a secret society among these magicians and those who perform sleight of hand with the playing cards?
Yeah, I mean, famously, magicians don't give up their secrets. Yeah, we went to the Magic Castle a few times in LA. I've gone there with him. That's definitely a fun place to hang out with him. There's definitely that element, but it's also built on we all stand on the shoulders of the giants that came before us. So there's definitely a long tradition. It used to be in the back room of the magic shop, where the kid would come in and you get ushered in the back, and all the older guys would be there, and they would show you how to do things. I think now a lot of that has moved online, and there's a new definite strong culture of people sharing work online. There's the fine line between sharing work and stealing work and showing how other people do things, and that's also become sort of a subset of the internet culture. I think showing how you do your tricks and the things that you've invented is fine. Maybe trying to give away other people's tricks is a little less cool. But I think that's part of the mystique of it. Is that when I entered this process at first, I didn't want to know anything. I was like, I still want to show up to the magic show completely naive and just be slack-jawed, and that'd be great. And then I was like, well, I'm going to be around some of the best magicians in the world. I should learn something. But making the film itself was just too time consuming. I never really got around to it. But yeah, I don't need to know a lot. Like I've learned some things, and just chatting to Shawn over the last 5 years. So I picked up some of the behind the scenes, but oftentimes the answer is not as satisfying, and what the actual technique and what they're doing is less interesting than what you imagined it to be.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I would rather be amazed and be in wonder watching them perform the card tricks. Now, with the magician from Spain, the older gentleman, and he did I guess it was the floating card trick. And I noticed that you did that through animation. Um, I guess you would have to do that because to even try to film something like that may give the secret away.
Yeah, he's kind of because of his age. Juan Tamariz, he's like sort of the godfather of card magic. Everyone looks up to him. He's the one person, everyone fanboys over Shawn. This is the person that Shawn was, nervous about spending time with and fanboying over him. So he doesn't really perform very much anymore. We were just very lucky even just to get him out to come out and talk to us. He'd been profiled in the New York Times shortly before that and just been swamped with like hundreds of interview requests after that. So we were lucky that he was part of the film. We tried very hard to find footage of the trip that he described because it is a pretty mind-blowing effect to even just to hear him talk about it. But unfortunately, we couldn't find it, so we had to go with the animation to try and film those gaps.
Yeah, I was shocked because I'm like, oh, I would have loved to actually see that in person. Of course, anybody would because as he explains it, your mind is trying to figure out how in the world he pulls that off in front of an
Totally
audience.
impossible. Yeah.
Yeah, and but I also loved the fact that these magicians look at a deck of cards in a whole different way than the general public does. Um, a lot of them look at it as storytelling.
Hmm.
There is so much mystery behind it, but I loved the saying in the film where "lost in the shuffle" means coming to terms with the feeling of being comfortable with uncertainty. And that real chaos in this life is about the balance, peace, and perfect harmony that can be found in a deck of cards. I was sitting there. I actually replayed that scene a couple of times because there's a whole lot of wisdom there.
Yeah, like I said, it's one of my goals in the film was that people would kind of walk away with a better appreciation of how much thought can go into it. Yeah, so Michael Vincent, I think people have really responded to his section, and obviously, the interviews that we shot are much longer than what's in the film, and he has a bunch of other gems involved there as well. But yeah, he talks about order versus chaos being kind of the fundamental underpinning of all card magic. That we they create what appears to be a very chaotic, random setup by whatever kind of steps the trick is going to take. But in fact, they are in complete control. And he talks about this one trick that he demonstrates for Shawn as being something that saved his life. And he himself, has had a lot of challenges. We don't talk about in the film, but in his 40s, he woke up one day profoundly deaf. And had to learn how to lip read because obviously, your rapport with an audience is a pretty essential part of being a magician and being a performer. And so you can't really tell now that he had that challenge, but yeah, I mean, he's managed to overcome that, and so magic saved his life.
I think out of all of the card tricks in the film, and I'm not going to give his away because I thought his was the most phenomenal to watch.
Yeah,
Going
and those were all first takes. We didn't know what they were going to do, so all the magicians that Shawn talks to them. Yeah, our DP and camera crew did a great job because we didn't know what was going to happen. So we were just kind of rolling with it. So yeah, we were all equally impressed with what we were watching.
Well, let me ask you this on the filmmaking side of this documentary. Did you have to edit all of the video footage to completion before you figured out the animation?
No, those things were happening kind of simultaneously because I had that treatment that I'd written at the beginning of the whole process. So ultimately, the animation didn't fit in the storyline where I thought it was going to. But I knew what those pieces were that I wanted to be. So the animators started working roughly around the same time that we started editing. I think they probably took about 2 or 3 months to get their end of things done.
Well, everything about this film is absolutely fantastic. So, uh, any new projects working on now?
Yeah, I've got some stuff in development. We're still, getting the film out. It's on like 6 different airlines right now. If people want to watch it at home, you can get it on iTunes, Amazon, YouTube, all those great places. Yeah, I've got some series ideas I'm working on. Another feature doc idea that is. I want to look at whether you think and feel entirely in your brain, or if there's anything to do with the idea. Let's say, we have an very old cultural linguistic idea, social idea that your heart is where you receive your emotions, where your love comes from. You're heartbroken, you're cold-hearted, all those kinds of things. Is there anything to this idea that there's other parts of your body are involved in your thinking and feeling life, or is it all just happening in your head?
I want to see that.
Me too, got the
Yeah,
money.
I want to see that because I know some of the science behind that. So I've talked to doctors who would talk about the element of, is a broken heart a real thing? And the ones I've talked to have said, yes, it is. So I can't wait to see that brand new film coming from you, John. And ladies and gentlemen, the film Lost in the Shuffle features two-time world champion magician Shawn Farquhar, and this documentary explores the very unique relationship between the art of magic and playing cards. This is one of the most fascinating films I have seen, as I absolutely love, and many of you know this, that I love documentaries because it's fun to learn new things. And this film is just fun to watch. I mean, there is mystery, there's intrigue, there's history, and even a bit of wisdom from some of the world's most renowned magicians who have used a deck of playing cards to entertain audiences around the world. Now, to learn more about this film and where to watch, and as John said, it's available on multiple airlines. So if you're taking a trip, make sure you look it up, Lost in the Shuffle, because it'll entertain you, take your mind off your flight, and you'll have a good time before you land. So this is a great film to watch. Or you can go to LostInTheShuffle.Film and be amazed with childlike wonder. And there you'll also find out where this film is available. John, I want to thank you so much for sharing this incredible film with the world and with me today.
Thank you. Thanks for the chat.
You're very welcome. And as for me, ladies and gentlemen, you're either going to see me at the movies or from the red carpet.